Welcome to Payments Playbook, the show where we explore the strategies and systems that drive smarter payments, stronger cash flow, and more profitable business. Brought to you by Paylink, the business-to-business payment experts. Now let's dive into today's episode. For today's episode of Payments Playbook, we have Mike Hogan with Insight 7. Welcome, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, Paul, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. To start with, Mike, can you share a little bit what Insight 7 is all about and your role in your background?
Sure. I'm the CEO and founder of Insight 7, and we are a platform as a service company. And basically, our primary focus is helping companies accelerate time to maximum value.
Okay.
And real simply, that kind of sounds like sort of a generic thing, but most companies globally sort of operate like um, with this org structure kind of and focus on work, but there isn't, if you think about the way we look at any company, it's a single value creation system. Its only purpose in life is to create value for customers in a way that's also creating value for the stakeholders.
Sure.
Yet most companies don't manage that way. So they sort of optimize for the parts versus the whole. It's kind of like, you know, if you believe your company is a single value creation system, you should have a process that governs and manages that system.
Yep.
And because you can't really optimize it if you don't see it and manage it. So otherwise, if you're sort of your underlying structure for managing value, most companies default to the org structure, which is optimized for managing labor resources, not for value. So, there's only so much you can do there. So we're basically have built an entire capability underpinned by this very powerful platform that allows companies to, again, sort of engineer their company and design it and optimize it for multi-capital value. So not just the financial capital side of it, but also the other capitals that we know that exist, more intangible capitals like knowledge capital management, right? That's
Right.
really what drives valuation of companies in this knowledge economy. You're looking at employee relationship capital, supplier relationship capital, community relationship capital. You're looking at the, manufactured capital, strategic capital. All of those things are very real. And when you're looking at, if you look at any company like a product, it's got a customer.
Right.
And so if you're going to manage to value, you have to define explicitly what value looks like. And we do that as companies, do a pretty good job of that as far as from a go-to-market products and service perspective. But we typically do a terrible job of it in terms of what does value look like in the minds of the stakeholders of the company. So if you don't define it, how do you know if you're on target? How do you know if you're engineered properly? And so it sounds really simple, but I think why our approach is unique is we are building this execution to strategy alignment capability, which means you got to define your strategy well enough and clear enough so that everybody in the organization knows, what their through line is to that, that ground truth of what value is.
Yep.
And then when everybody's clear on that, everybody understands how they interconnect and interrelate, they're making better decisions. So our company is really about, we started off in 2008 as a services company doing professional services along this same objective. And then that's where I chose to invest and to build the technology to underpin that. We did managed services. And then we just had huge success with clients in all industries, all sizes, all geographies, because it doesn't really care what we're talking about here, as hopefully you'll agree, Paul, is doesn't care what industry you're in.
Right.
It's all about creating value in the context of whatever your business is focusing on. And yet that's just, even though that's like job one, why isn't I've always sort of scratched my head going, why isn't there an explicit process and system to manage that. Shouldn't that be the first enterprise system?
Yes.
So that's what we've done, and that's been my career, is just working with a lot of different companies to help. We get engaged, on the services side in some of the real hot spots, really difficult areas where companies are struggling, whether that's on the production side or on the go-to-market side, or whether it's on the, again, we work a lot with the executive teams now to try to help drive business performance. But it's always in this context. And so we've just institutionalized all that learning that we've benefited from, mainly because we work with great customers.
Sure.
But we've institutionalized that into the platform so we can leverage that learning. And so, we just want to make a bigger impact, because when you operate this way, your performance goes up, but so does the enjoyment, and teams, not just from the leadership perspective, when everybody understands the value they provide in an organization, they tend to be more engaged and have higher quality of life. And at the end of the day, that's probably one of the biggest things that makes me happy about what we do.
You're talking about stakeholders, customer stakeholders. There's subsets within the organization, right? So there's stakeholders in the production part. You help define that. Um, do you have a dashboard, or do you have any KPIs or metrics within the platform on how you're doing?
Absolutely. That's probably the main piece of it. So again, if you're defining, kind of the way we look at it is, first you have to create the map of the end-to-end value chain,
Right.
right? And then every link in that value chain is a relationship. It's a customer supplier relationship. So if you think about it, the only reason any of us in any job, whoever's listening to this, I don't care where you are, if you think about where you exist in your company, we focus on work, but it's really about, you only do work to create something that somebody else considers valuable enough to consume, because it helps them do their job,
Correct.
and so on and so on. So in essence, in every company, there's really only two roles: customers and suppliers. And interestingly enough, we usually all play both. So to answer your question, though, when I'm clear about, no matter where I am, who my customer is, and I'm clear that I am accountable and responsible for delivering value to that customer, and we have alignment on what that value looks like. It's kind of like an SLA, if you will. It doesn't have to be formal, but the KPIs should reflect that. We talk about being ground truth. This is um, if I'm a value delivery part of that value chain,
Right.
I want my customer to be focusing on, am I hitting the target? Did I do the job to be done? And did I do it within the quality, cost, and um, time
Right.
that meets their expectations? And if I do that all the time, I am going to always kind of get that, 1 out of 5 rating, 5 being the best every time. The challenge is, in most organizations, people don't know who their customers are, much less what the target looks like.
Right.
So then, how do you know if you're actually engineering to something that's going to get that 5 on that customer sat rating? You don't. So what I've always been, I'm like, customer expectations always exist. They're either implicit or explicit, and it's stressful trying to manage the implicit ones, because you never hit it.
Right.
But if you can be clear on what your customer and stakeholder expectations are, then you go back to your delivery team, me as a supplier now, and say, team, let's make sure that whatever we're building and resourcing and spending money on is going to hit the bullseye for our customers in a way that's also going to make our stakeholders happy from a value perspective. And so, therefore, our dashboard has to reflect how we're doing against all those metrics that reflect value, so that the second I start to see drift in one area or in multiple areas, the next question is, we got to prioritize which one is going to, open up the flow of value the most.
Yep.
And then we invest on closing that. So it's about recognizing, we call them value drifts, So it's to walk to the red, find the red, and then manage to the green.
Yep.
So every metric is looked at in terms of not just actual performance against target, but we're also looking at what the green, yellow, and red thresholds are. So there's always context. So as you can
And the
imagine,
advantage is it's setting you up where you can be proactive versus reactive as things are, there's webs and flows and everything, right?
exactly. And again, this is sort of when you're looking at everything as a single system, you know, there's going to be multiple things that are in red. And if you're managing your company in terms of functions, you're optimizing for the parts, but you may be doing that at the expense of overall value flow because you don't
Sure.
know how they connect. But with us, because everything is mapped and interconnected, when you start to identify those reds through the KPIs, the next thing you do is go, okay, let's prioritize them from a kind of the old Eisenhower matrix from importance and urgency
Yep.
so that you're making great decisions first before you even talk about how to solve the problem. You're prioritizing which problem is going to create the most value if we address it and solve it. And then now let's ideate. So our system manages this entire life cycle from defining value to establishing what the map looks like, understanding who's accountable for delivery, how they're performing, where those drifts are, prioritizing the gaps, and then making the value cost risk time to value business cases.
Yep.
And then when those improvements get deployed, because they are tied to closing gaps, you're actually tracking return on investment and time to value. So the system manages all that. That's why we call it kind of the ground truth.
Right.
Because no matter where you are in the organization, if you want to know what's going on and who's responsible for what and how performance is looking, you go to one system.
Yep.
So one of the things, Paul, that's kind of the byproduct of this is the number of meetings that happen in organizations drops
Okay.
and the time in meetings drops, but the productivity goes up. Because think about just the amount of time you spend in meetings just trying to get everybody on the same page.
Oh, I hear you.
Well,
Yep.
that kind of goes away because everybody's locked into what that ground truth looks like. And I should say, part of, once you have that information, at the we have something called the weekly commitment. So everybody in the context of their role in that value chain is coming in and saying, this is what I'm going to commit to getting done this week. And they connect it. They literally explicitly connect it to one or more KPIs or KRs if they're doing OKRs, because we do stretch goals as well using OKRs. And so that way, one of the big questions is that I've myself have had and other CEOs have had is when you show up every day, how do you know if what people are working on is that which matters most to the
Yep.
organization?
You're right.
And you don't. How do you know people are all rowing in the same direction? It's the hardest thing to do. But when you now make sure people are tying their work commitments to, the metrics that matter the most, um, then what they do after that every day is about how do I make sure that I achieve that goal by the end of the week. And if everybody's thinking and operating that way, and you sort of the force multiplier of doing that across the entire organization in an interconnected way,
Well, it's
the over
exponential.
it's exponential, and that's how we deliver on the promise of accelerating time to maximum value. It's just by sheer focus and alignment.
Well, and you've worked with bigger companies. I've worked in bigger companies. There's so much inefficiencies within a company, right? With your
Unbelievable.
system and platform, you're eliminating of that. But there's what I see is the employee, whatever it is, they're taking ownership of a process, of a project, or whatever, and it's measurable. And you don't have all that bantering back and forth where nobody wants to take responsibility. with your system, you're laying out the responsibility. You're the stakeholder. You're the decision maker on moving this project forward. Is that a good assumption?
That's a great assumption, and it's a key one. It's a critical success factor, and it's one of the things that when we're starting with a prospective customer leadership team, there's six key assumptions, but one of those is, are you comfortable driving accountability into your organization?
Right.
And oddly enough, some people aren't because they kind of feel like I don't want to stress or burden employees that way. But what I find is the absence of accountability, responsibility creates more stress because you're wondering, am I doing the right things?
Right.
So we take that, you know, when everything is clear, you don't have to stress about whether I'm doing the right thing or not, or who do I get involved because I know who my customers are, but I know who my stakeholders are, and I know who my fellow delivery team members are. So that kind of RACI is always there and understandable, you know, the responsible, accountable, supported, consulted, and informed. So again, it's really about clarity. Because if you think about, and I hear this all the time from the leaders that I've worked with, is really capable people. They say, look, I know what to do and I know how to do it. The hardest part, as I said earlier, is getting everybody rowing in the right direction.
Right.
And that is another way of saying that. The way we talk about it is, how do you ensure that execution is aligned to the goals and principles of the strategy? And so that's what our system is doing, is taking that guesswork out of it and making it explicit, so that, to your point, most of the inefficiencies and the bad decisions that happen every day in every business aren't because you have people who aren't capable or smart or whatever. It has to do with misaligned expectations.
Right. Yep.
And if, you know, when you make decisions in terms about how to resource or how to do work, the if you know the answer to why you're doing that, then you're going to make better decisions across the board. And really, that's what we're providing, is the why.
Yep.
So we're saying, you know who your customer is and you know what the targets look like, then you can rationalize everything. So we like to say it's a perpetual business case for anybody everywhere within the organization.
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, you don't get things held up in limbo, because I've been involved in those things with big companies where it just drags on forever, and no decision is made, no action is taken, and it just sits there. Plus, the other thing I think of is a value, or any of the employees. Uh, Job satisfaction and feeling good about themselves, because they know what they're supposed to be doing and they're meeting the targets. I would have to believe employee performance and satisfaction goes up dramatically.
Yeah, you're right. I would say it's one of the key metrics that's, it's not necessary. It's the byproduct of doing what,
Right.
when you operate with corporate value management in mind, the byproduct is your employee being able to attract and retain top talent goes way up for exactly what you're doing. And you think about it just from a recruiting perspective, um, when you can be really clear about where you're hiring, not
Right.
functionally, but in terms of, this is what your job is, and by the way, this is how you're going to be measured. A lot of people will opt out. So people who are not qualified candidates will opt out on their own. So you waste less time just in the recruiting side. So you end up getting better candidates faster. And
Oh,
then once
interesting.
they're in, yeah, your ability to manage them once they're in, and I don't even like the term managing them because nobody likes to be managed, but it's really how you're supporting them. You're saying, okay,
Right.
let there be no doubt, this is what you're coming to do. We're hiring you because you're the expert in this domain area. And we as leaders, our job is to make sure that you're clear on who your customers are and what target value looks like.
Yep.
And then your job is to lead us to great decisions that make sure that we're hitting customer and stakeholder value on an ongoing basis. And so we really are supporting those folks. So this is what empowered organizations really look like. I don't know how you do empowerment legitimately if you're not using, you know, the value chain structure.
I 100% agree. And, for the C-suite, it'd be easy for them to reward and recognize the people within the higher or chain. I don't know if you want to say hierarchy within the chain. Um,
Sure.
Reward those people accordingly that are excelling at what they're doing.
Yeah, and it becomes easy to do because your the dashboard, if you will,
Right.
is common across the entire value chain, right? So there's no shortage of ways of things that can be tracked and measured, right? It's you can measure everything.
Right.
The hard part is what should we measure, right? And what matters. So we're helping to do that. And then it also provides context. Doesn't mean you still don't need the other, let me just step back and say one of the things that we impact the most is return on invested capital.
Okay.
And so that's, it's going to be how do I get more velocity out of my labor force, whether that's contractors or employees, but also for my investments. And this is where AI comes in, right? So if everybody, whether it's a human being or an AI agent, has context in terms of value and work to value relationship, you're going to get way more velocity out of this. So what we end up doing is um, sort of when you look at the existing investment in technology,
Yep.
we're increasing that because it becomes very clear how to optimize those investments to be able to get the most value out of it. But when you take value out of the equation, what do people default to? Well, we've always done it this way, or best practice, or I did it in
Right.
my last job and it seemed to work, so we're going to do that here. But it should always be optimized for what that specific company wants to do in that particular area. So, when we talk about return on capital, it's not just the financial capital, but it's also the labor side of it, which is funded by financial capital. But
Absolutely.
it's that return on when everybody, and you alluded to this earlier, Paul, when everybody's clear on what value looks like and um, what they are responsible for and what they have at their disposal to deliver that value, a lot of the inefficiencies go away
Right.
because inefficiency in most organizations comes from guessing. I don't know exactly what we're supposed to do, and so
Yep.
based on what I know and my perception, I'm going to guess. And
Yep.
then I have to find out later, and someone goes, "What in that, Mike? What did you do that for? That's not what we wanted." I'm like, "Oh, shoot." And then you go back. So now you've lost time, you've lost money and opportunity cost. So if you focus on sort of, it's like slow down to go fast. Start with the end in mind. Make sure, and that's really what our system is doing. It's making sure everybody is nodding and said, yes, we have shared understanding of what target value looks like and who's responsible for delivering it, what the all that stuff that goes into at the end of the day, that's all we're doing is delivering value. So let's make sure that
Yep.
systems and investments are aligned to that. Otherwise, it's just it really I mean, I'd love to say, hey, we're brilliant and we've come up with something that's so fantastic, but most businesses, there's just they kind of run really badly. So you don't have to. I mean, that's why we're making 10% improvement across the key KPIs for business value.
Yep.
That's like minimum for us. That's pretty massive. We tend to be more into 30 to 70% depending on how it's
Wow.
functioning. Yeah. And it's just because I mean, we are really good at what we do, but it's also because things are really bad. That's sort of the
Yeah.
default.
Yep. Yep. And with how when you work with a company, what's your business model? Do you engage? Is it a SaaS platform or do you contract? What's that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're a platform as a service company, but we have services. that lead up to that, because it's enough of a, if I'm on the customer side of this, I'm going to go, I want to know a little bit more. I want to kind of sort of like going into the dressing room. I want to try this thing on and take a look at it before I decide if I want to pay for it and bring it home.
Right.
And so that's what our front end services are, is, we'll typically engage in a smaller engagement, depending on the size of the organization, from a, ten to $40,000 engagement, where we go in and we literally build their business in the platform so that they can see it
Yep.
for themselves, and they will see their business in a way that they've never seen it before. And in the process, we will have solved some very key problems for them.
Okay.
So at the end of that engagement, we'll also say, if it's your opportunity to make the decision, yes, I want to use the platform as a service, and we want this to be our mode of operation going forward. And at that point, that's when we would start charging for the platform as a service. But otherwise, it is a professional service ahead of that. So tactically, we're going in and solving a problem. Strategically, it's giving them the opportunity to evaluate
Right.
if this is how they actually want to operate. And the thing that we say, when we engage at that level, if at the end of that engagement, if they don't see the value, we don't charge them. That's how
Really?
confident we are in it. Just because, again, we know what the impact is.
Sure.
And so, and we have never had anyone say, no,
Well, that's good.
don't charge it.
Do you have
Send that in.
do you have a size company that is kind of your sweet spot, or that you enjoy working with?
Yeah. So I would say, SMB companies that are funded and in growth minded and are growth minded, and SME. So, it's companies that are like 10 million up to, maybe 2 billion.
Okay.
And if I were to sort of look at it, I would say it's really at that. I mean, we've done work at the enterprise level. It's just more the politics are thick, and it just takes a longer time to get this moving. And I think once we start to demonstrate in the marketplace that this is the only way, I look at us as sort of this paradigm shift of like moving from taxis to Uber.
Yep.
And ultimately, when enterprises look over and kind of go, oh, I don't want to be taking a taxi anymore. I want to be, the Uber, we're the corporate value management, then we'll get pulled over and it'll drive that. But, we're too small at this point to try to, capture those opportunities. And we want leaders that are still involved enough in the business versus kind of too far removed from where value is being created. So that's sort of our sweet spot. But I would say, it's not necessarily industry wise. I mean, we've worked in all industries and those different sizes that we've talked about. But say, Paul, that one of the key things is just that it's more the mindset of
Right.
those leaders that are saying, I'm not beholden to the status quo way of operating. I'm looking for an edge.
Yep.
I'm looking for a way to blow away my competition. I'm looking for a way to start to, go achieve some of these targets that up to this point has seemed impossible. But now with Insight 7, we've expanded our understanding of what's possible, and now let's go after it. Those are the leaders that we love working with, and they love working with us.
Well, and
Versus the ones that are kind of complacent, or kind of like, hey, I didn't get where I am by being a dummy right now, and sort of
right.
feel threatened by it. Versus there's these other leaders that are fantastic that are saying, they're saying the same thing. I didn't get where I am by, being the dummy, but they're also saying, I recognize the hardest part is getting everybody to row in the right direction. So
Right.
I need help there. And what Insight 7 does for those leaders, they recognize we're not a threat to them. We're actually amplifying their excellence and their understanding, and we're helping them to sort of bring that vision into the entire end-to-end operation,
Yep.
which is arguably one of the most challenging things that every leader has.
Yeah, it's reminds me of who's the Gophers football coach? Roll the boat. We're all rowing in the
Same direction.
yeah,
Yeah,
that just popped into my mind.
that's exactly it. We got to, how do you get everybody rowing in the same direction?
Yep,
Because if they're not, all with the best intentions, that's where the inefficiency and ineffectiveness comes in.
absolutely. Yep, and the org charts are gone, basically.
Well, the org charts still serve a purpose, but the organizational structure is subordinate to the value chain structure,
Right.
not the other way around. Because back to our point is, if you're asking those leaders in the value chain link to say, help us understand how to close those performance gaps, you're asking them to lead that and kind of create the, option A, B, and C business case, value, cost, risk business cases. Then it helps the leaders to be able to make a great decision. And all we're really doing, because you want that accountability maybe higher up, right? So that's where the org structure still makes sense. I kind of look at the vertical as being more of the org structure decision
Right.
making, and then the horizontal is the value chain, and they work hand in glove. But the way I've seen it manifest in real life is companies that were kind of command and control, right?
Right.
Decision, the higher up the food chain you go, the better the decisions mindset versus making the switch to more of that value creator mindset that says the closer decisions are to where value is being created, the better the decisions.
Agree.
Those are not compatible, right? Because the higher up the food chain you are, you're usually further removed from where the value is being created in day-to-day operations.
Right.
So the way these two meet and where it becomes compatible is when you've got leaders saying, I trust you, the leaders at the value creation level, to help me make great decisions by providing good information in terms of value, cost, risk, time to value.
Right.
So I'll take the hit for it, but I need you to be able to make the case, and then I need you to be able to execute and start to close those gaps.
Yep.
And that's a very healthy relationship, and that's where you build trust within your organization. Because if you say, hey, Paul, I trust you, and I'm empowering you, and then you're seeing something, you make a recommendation, and I come in and go, you know what, I read an article last night about, I have no idea what you actually do, but I read an article and we're going to do it this way, different than what you said. You're going to be like,
Yeah.
that's all trust gone.
Yep.
And that news travels fast, and that's how trust is lost in organizations, and where, again, not just the inefficiency, but the cultural toxicity kind of creeps in.
Yep.
I call that the incompatibility of systems with the strategy.
Yep.
So if you're talking strategy about we want to empower people, and then you do something like that, your system, you just executed on a system that actually does not embody and reflect what you communicated your strategy is.
Yep.
And that's really tough to recover from leaders. So big part of what we're doing is helping leaders create strategies, right? And then being able to, beauty of the value chain is you're actually able to map the systems across the value chain and
Right.
then look and say, where are the gaps? And if there's any misalignment, we got three choices. We make the changes and align the system to that strategy, or we modify the strategy because some systems you just may not be able to.
Right.
And but you modify it so that there's alignment. And the third option, which I hope is not an option, is you don't align them and you still go out and talk about it as this is our strategy, and hope that nobody notices, which is not a good idea.
Well, very good. Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time. How do people find out more about Insight 7 and how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so insights7.com, and that's insights plural, INSIGHTS 7.com. Otherwise, feel free to, in fact, I was going to say, anybody who's watching this, if you go to LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn, I'm there, and DM me and just put value. And if you do that, I will send you a playbook in terms of how to drive this execution to strategy alignment.
Okay.
And Or of course, if you want to set up a 20-minute, 30-minute call, learn more about it. What if you're on the customer side of it? We also, Paul, I just want to say we work with partners as well. So if you're a partner and you're interested in learning more about that, DM me, partner, and we'll reach out. I'll send you a Calendly link. We'll set something up. But love to talk to anybody who finds this interesting, or even wants to poke at it. I love to be challenged on it. Please reach out, and look forward to that.
All right. Well, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. This was a treat.